Welcome back to episode 2 of Learn Dota. Thanks to everyone who made the series happen, and let's finish up the laning stage. In the last episode, we described the laning stage as a tug of war. The tug of war in Dota 2 occurs throughout the whole game, but it's more visible in the laning stage because of last hitting and kills. However, last hits alone don't show who is pulling the most weight, since there are many heroes and roles within a game of Dota 2. So let's cover some of the roles you'll be playing within the laning stage. In a typical Dota 2 pub game, you'll be running dual lanes, or 2 heroes in 2 of your lanes, and 1 hero in your third lane, usually the mid lane. In the past, having a tri-lane, or 3 heroes in 1 lane, and solo heroes in your other 2 lanes was more common, but Dota 2's strategy changes over time. So the dual lanes generally look something like this on the strategy screen. 2 heroes in the off lane, 1 in mid, and 2 heroes in the safe lane. I certainly drove home how important it is to last hit in the first episode, and in the mid lane where it's almost always a 1 versus 1, that principle is the same. But in the other lanes where both teams will have 2 heroes, last hitting is almost entirely done by 1 hero on each team, not both of them. That's because if both you and your ally in your lane attempt each last hit, you end up competing with each other for those last hits. With both of you attacking, there's a much larger chance that one of you attacks too early and ruins the ability for either of you to get a last hit. So if you both try to last hit, you'll likely get less last hits and denies overall. And one of you could be doing something more productive, since waiting around for each last hit means you can't move far from the creep wave. So the compromise is you usually have 1 hero in the lane that goes for last hits, while the other hero participates in the less obvious tug of war. This hero is almost always the support of the lane. For example, if I'm a support in a lane, I could focus my hero's attacks on denying, since I won't be last hitting. If my carry gets the last hits and I get the denies, I'm helping to win the lane. I could also focus on right-clicking the enemy hero who's trying to get last hits. It's best to do this whenever possible, but it's important that I don't accidentally grab creep aggro when I right-click the enemy, because the creeps will attack me and I'll take damage. In fact, a mix of denying creeps and harassing your enemy lays the foundation of supporting in the laning stage. If you're in the lane and you're standing there, you should be doing one of those things. If your carry is dead and respawning or too far away from the creeps, then you should get last hits so that someone on your team gets the gold. And obviously, you should always be on the lookout for opportunities to kill enemy heroes. The same goes for your life. Avoid dying to the enemy team and try to keep your health full so that it's harder to be killed. I mentioned a moment ago that you shouldn't grab creep aggro when harassing the enemy in the side lanes. That's because in addition to the creeps attacking you, it upsets creep equilibrium. Creep equilibrium is a term that describes the ebb and flow of the creep wave, or how the creep wave moves. Because a new creep wave spawns every 30 seconds, you can visualize each wave meeting as 2 waves crashing into each other. The crashing part is where the creeps meet and fight to see who is stronger. The stronger wave will win the fight and push towards the enemy base until they find another wave to fight, or a tower to smash against. At the start of the game, the creep waves meet in a normal starting point. For the safe lanes, Radiant Bot, or Dire Top, the creep waves meet close to their tower. This is called the safe lane because the creep wave is closer to your tower, so it's not very far to the tower's safety if you get in danger. The opposite side of the lane is called the off lane, or hard lane. Their lane is harder because the creep wave meets far away from the safety of their tower. Usually the hard carry of the team will lane in the safe lane with a support because it's safer to gain last hits and ramp up slowly into a late game monster. They usually lane against the enemy offlane hero, who is often a tanky hero who can better survive being far away from their tower. They also might be focused on pressuring the enemy carry with harassment and attacking, rather than caring quite as much about their resources. Both sides in an average game will have supports with them that help them in the lane, but this can vary widely and change game to game. Okay, back to equilibrium and waves. One thing you can do to help your lane be in a safer location is to body block your creep waves. Every hero has a physical space in the game which prevents things like creeps from walking directly through you, they have to go around. You can use this to slowly block the path of your creeps as they run to lane. If done well, it results in your creeps reaching the lane late, which means the creep wave meets closer to your tower. If you block your creep wave and your opponents don't, then the wave positioning is more favorable to your team. This is especially important in the mid lane because you could get the creep wave to meet on your high ground, forcing your opponent to attack and deny uphill for the first wave. Creep blocking also helps a lot if you're in the off lane, because the normal creep equilibrium meeting place is right in front of the enemy tower. If you have the right hero, You can even use path blocking abilities to delay your creep wave for the same reason, though it does cost you mana points to do this. Earthshaker's Fissure works very well for this, as does Clockwork's Power Cogs. Now that your creeps have met, remember that creeps deal very similar amounts of damage. That means that 2 creep waves fighting will generally kill each other at the same time. If 2 creep waves fight like this to the last man and both die, then the next set of creeps 30 seconds later will meet around the same starting wave position. If someone comes along and adds damage, say by attacking or using abilities, it results in one of the waves winning the fight much earlier and pushing forward. That push will be crushed by the next enemy wave, but they'll deal a little damage before dying, which makes their follow-up wave stronger than the enemy remainder. The easiest way to figure out if your wave is pushing like this is if your wave has more creeps. More creeps is more damage, so the wave is pushing. If your waves have the same number of creeps but your creeps have more health, even by a small amount, then your wave is going to push because your creeps will stay alive for longer and get more attacks off. You might think all of this doesn't matter much, but it's a huge deal because a pushing wave changes the place your creep wave meets. Generally, you want your creep wave to stay put if it's in a favorable place. You have to also remember that your attacks add damage to the wave, which leads to pushing. The most common way to do this is to auto-attack. Auto-attacking is primarily bad because it'll result in missed last hits, which is enemy number 1, but pushing is enemy number 2 at the start of the laning stage. A pushed wave makes it safer for your opponent to get last hits and experience, and harder for you to safely get last hits and experience. So maybe you promise to never auto-attack a wave and deal too much damage. However, you also have to be careful that you don't reduce the damage the enemy wave deals, which is what happens when you aggro the enemy creeps. Lane creeps are pretty brainless, so they function the same as your hero does when you issue an A click on the ground. They're traveling to points along the line and will attack any enemies on their path. If you get in their way before they meet the enemy lane creeps, they'll chase and attack you until something closer catches their interest. Aggroing like this usually happens if you're standing near the new incoming enemy creep wave. It might happen when you're walking to the side shop to purchase your boots. It also happens sometimes if you're sitting by the trees waiting for your enemy to approach. If you're in aggro range of the creeps and they can see your hero, they will aggro. You won't always aggro the full creep wave, as every creep has its own circle of aggro, so if the creep wave is more spread out, you might only aggro part of the wave. Whether you get only one creep or many, it's very important to bring them back to your creep wave so they can start attacking your creeps. To do so, just run past your creep wave and the enemy creeps will change their focus once they find someone closer to battle, and then you won't be chased anymore. Just remember that if you aggro creeps like this and you don't react in time to pull them to your wave, you're probably going to have a push on your hands. That's because you're interfering in the creep battle and upsetting the creep equilibrium. You're not dealing damage to the creeps like the time you're auto-attacking, but you're taking damage that should be meant for your creeps. That means you're pushing, which is bad. Remember that trick in the last video where you can aggro the enemy creep wave to help last hitting? Well, using that trick, either on purpose or not, is sometimes a bad thing, especially if you're in the safe lane. As shown in the last video, if you stand near an enemy creep and right-click an enemy hero to harass them, you're going to pull the same aggro, which means they stop attacking enemy creeps, even for a moment. So even if the creep wave already met where it's supposed to, you have to be careful not to pull aggro from the creep wave when harassing. Sometimes this could be as simple as accidentally pulling aggro from a range creep for 5 to 10 seconds. If you don't de-aggro that range creep, your wave will push. Now that aggro range from right-clicking enemies has a limit to it. So as long as you aren't standing within that range and the lane creeps have already met, then you won't pull aggro and push the lane. It helps in this case to be a ranged hero, or to wrap around and approach the hero from the back where there are less creeps and more area to work in. Want another tip to de-aggro? The best one is to press the attack key, most often the A key, and left-click an ally, creep or hero, doesn't matter. When you do this A left-click on an ally, things like enemy creeps, even towers, will change their targets to another enemy close by within their attack range. So if you pull aggro when fighting an enemy hero, or if you pull aggro from an enemy tower while your creeps are there, you can de-aggro this by spamming the A left-click on an allied hero or creep. So now that you have heaps of things not to do to mess up equilibrium, let's cover a few ways to fix equilibrium if mistakes get made and your wave gets pushed. If your wave is only slightly pushing, or is about to push, the easiest way to fix this is spam deny your allied creeps. What I mean by spam deny is you attack your creeps as soon as possible to damage them, which is when the creeps have less than half HP. Attacking your creeps like this means they die sooner and deal less damage, which helps the enemy wave deal equal damage. The carry is usually the one who deals with this, but sometimes the support can help as well to ensure the wave goes back to neutral. In fact, the carry will almost always do a little of this in the lane, since even getting last hits pushes the lane a tiny amount. So that's some mistakes you can make while laning in regards to creep equilibrium, and some solutions to prevent them before they cascade. But what do you do if the equilibrium gets pushed out of control? The first step is to continue to get last hits if safe and possible. One of the heroes in lane will accomplish this, and the other should attempt to pull. Pulling is your best tool for resetting creep equilibrium, because it's one of the only ways you can essentially kill your allied creeps when they have full health. To pull, you approach neutral creeps near the creep wave, aggro them to you with an attack or by walking nearby, and then you run away from the neutral creeps into your lane, pulling them after you. If done correctly, your lane creeps will aggro onto the neutral creeps and follow them into the jungle. Neutral creeps are basically tethered to their jungle location, so they won't chase you for very long, so you have to time your pull to correctly aggro your incoming creep wave. What happens when you start your pull is the enemy wave will continue walking towards your tower, but won't find any enemy creeps to fight, and thus will push. If your carry stays in lane, like they should be able to last hit the creep wave under your tower, especially with help from an item like Quelling Blade. While your carry continues getting those last hits, back in the jungle the pull continues. After your lane creeps follow the neutrals to their tethered location, they will fight to the death since neutrals hate both Radiant and Dire units. When your lane creeps kill neutral creeps, the neutral creep death gives nearby heroes experience, either you or any enemies nearby. At the same time, it's also important that you last hit these creeps if possible, since it's free gold to gain. When you do a pull like this, you should expect all of the neutral creeps to die. That's because a wave of lane creeps is far stronger than one camp spawned here. Once your lane creeps defeat this camp or become de-aggroed, they'll either aggro to any nearby targets left over, or they'll walk back to the lane and continue on their path. They just got a little sidetracked from destroying the Ancient. If they survive like this and head back to the lane, what usually results is a push, since they'll stack up with a new set of lane creeps and be too strong to stop. That's sort of the whole thing you wanted to prevent in the first place when pulling, so what you need to do is pull through or connect your pull. To accomplish this, you'll need more neutral creeps to be there upon the death of the first wave, so your creeps aggro to the next camp instead of heading back to the lane. This part can be tricky to time, but if it's accomplished, then the leftover creeps will head to the next camp, and almost always die there. For this reason, pulling triply benefits your team's tug of war. You're first forcing the enemy team's wave to push towards your tower, which is more safe for your carry to get last hits. Second, it gives you, the hero pulling, some last hits and experience from the neutral creeps dying while you pull. Thirdly, if a neutral creep kills your lane creep, that prevents the enemy team from getting a last hit on that creep. If they aren't nearby either, they also gain 0 experience from the lane creep dying. Remember how the laning stage is mostly focused on the last hits and experience gained from lane creeps? They spawn every 30 seconds from 3 different lanes, so pulling prevents the enemy from gaining the gold and experience from one of those waves, while also benefiting your gold and experience gain. It's one of the best things you can do in the laning stage tug of war. Pulling isn't just limited to the safe lane heroes, but it's certainly easier. We'll go more in depth with all the tips and counters to pulling in a different video, but before we go, let's round out a few more things supports want to spend their time on in the laning stage when they aren't harassing, denying, or pulling creeps. Supports also want to buy and place observer wards when possible. If you watched the Dota Basics series, we went over vision and talked about warding a bit. If you're a bit unsure how it works, you might want to check that video out as well. Observer wards should be placed in areas you want to see your enemies, and it's generally best to place these when you have downtime between other tasks, or place them while you're doing those other tasks. For example, while you're moving to another lane to gank a hero, you could place a ward on a cliff you're walking past, or you could drop a ward as you execute your gank. You should also keep an eye on the timer for when bounty runes spawn. Bounty runes give a good chunk of gold, so keeping vision over bounty rune areas and securing them is a huge help to your team. Right now they spawn every 5 minutes, but that could get changed tomorrow with a new patch, making this video useless! Another great thing to do when you can is stack neutral camps. Neutral camps respawn at the start of each minute when the camp is empty. That means no neutrals standing inside, no heroes, and no wards planted within the spawn boxes. To stack a camp, you just have to game the system a bit. If you time your attack on a neutral camp so that they run outside of the spawn box at the respawn timer, a new set of neutrals can be spawned, and you'll hear a sound to confirm you did it right. When the wave you pulled returns back, they realize they have new neighbors. Stacking camps is useful mostly because a hero moving to clear these camps will be able to collect more gold and experience from each camp because there are more neutrals. If they have any area of effect or AoE damage, they should also be able to clear the camps a little faster, even though there are more things to kill. In addition, stacking a camp that someone else kills later gives you a little gold when the stacked camp is cleared. So if you're walking through the jungle around the 50-second mark, try holding Alt to see the neutral spawn box, and pull the creeps out in time for the 1 minute mark. Just remember that each camp's leash range is a bit different. Camps should be pulled between the 53-second up to the 56-second mark to make the pull in time. You can even stack 2 or more camps at the same time if you have a ranged ability that allows you to aggro multiple camps. And that covers most aspects of the laning stage that you'll need to get started in the game. Collect more stuff than your opponents, try to limit how much stuff they can collect, and make sure that you kill them more than they kill you. That should give you a general idea for how to play Dota for the first 10 minutes of the game. For the rest, you'll have to wait till the next video. Thanks for watching.